Welcome to Pop Culture Roulette for all your pop culture needs. We're America's podcast. Well, welcome everybody. Apparently, Jeremy still being held captive at the anime convention. But we
Yeah,
are
work,
joined
work,
by
working off his debts.
Justin,
Yeah, I should be held captive somewhere with the technology issues I have.
and his dog Lucy has apparently decided to join us for today's episode.
Yeah,
So, all right, so I don't. I've been struck with this idea. Sometimes I get ideas stuck in my head, and who knows if this episode's going to end up being any good or not? Because sometimes when I just get an idea trapped in my head, it isn't the best episode. But who knows? We'll find out.
right.
Um, I have been really fascinated with the idea of bands that change lead singers. Um,
What
eh,
drew you to this
we'll we'll
fascination?
we'll get there as we go along. We'll come across the one that is really dug me into this subject. But it's like because it's like, well, like you've established yourself as a band, you're going along, and all of a sudden something happens. And I have four categories. Um, I have Oops, I Did It Again, Don't Fear the Reaper, Soul Sucking Jerk, and We Are Never Ever Ever Getting Back Together.
Ever?
Ever.
I knew you were a closet Swiftie.
All right, so first we're going to start with "Oops, I Did It Again." These are bands that, for whatever reason, ditched their lead singer and then ended up going back to their lead singer.
Okay,
So we have Van Halen. That's one of the first. I didn't put these necessarily in like year order. I just kind of like as I was finding research, like some of them are going to be newer, some of them are going to be older. Uh, all of them are pretty much rock. Like you know, nothing in my list. Now, it could be that because I don't like country music, my search algorithm never comes up with anything country.
which is good.
Um, and there weren't like very many R&B bands that are none of them came up on the list. So either country and R&B just don't change out lead singers ever, and only rock bands do, or they're on separate lists and I didn't find them. So if you have a country band or some other band that has changed the lead singer, comment. Tell us what they are. I mean, we're not going to care, but you can tell us.
Yeah, at least then we know they're out there. They
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah. So anyway, we have Van Halen, who this is a fun one. There's a couple bands that are just wild and insane. Van Halen is just the tip of the iceberg. David Lee Roth was their first lead singer. Um, Now some of them I don't remember why, but he quit, got fired, then they went to Sammy Hagar.
Yeah,
Then they went back to David Lee Roth, and then they fired him again. And they went to Gary Sharon, and then went back to Sammy Hagar, and then he quit, and then they went back to David Lee Roth,
third time's the charm.
apparently. And then Alex Van Halen, he passed away, and the Van Halen just kind of was like, okay, we're done now. But do you
That,
have
that's
do you
fair.
have a favorite version of Van Halen? Do you got the David Lee Roth? You like Sammy Hagar or Gary Sharon?
Not. I'm trying to think of some of the ones I like. I think I like both David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar. I don't know if there's one I like more than the other. I think I know more Sammy Hagar stuff because I don't know as much of the older, the original.
Yeah. Well, and because there were so many of them going back and forth, it's hard to remember or hard to figure out what album was who. And
Yeah, which is which, trying to
yeah,
hear the voice when they're singing.
right. I think I prefer David Lee Roth, but I'm not sure. I could be wrong, but
Right.
All right, now we have Judas Priest, who was started with Rob Halford. He had some drug issues, and so they fired him and went with a guy who has one of the most rock and roll names ever. Not the most rock and roll name on the list. We'll get to him. Ripper Owens, probably not his birth name,
Yeah.
but
Not Ripper by birth.
and then they went back to Rob Halford.
For that one is for sure Rob Halford.
Yeah. Black Sabbath started with Ozzy, and he had so many drugs and alcohol and other issues that they fired him and went to Ronnie James Dio.
Both classics. I don't know if I prefer one over the other.
Then
Maybe
Dio,
Ozzy stuff, but I really like Dio's solo stuff.
yeah, and then Dio quit, and then they went through a whole lot of guys, and then they went back to Ozzy.
Yeah, between Ozzy and Dio, which one do you like better?
Probably Ozzy.
Yeah,
I
I like Dio's solo stuff.
other than Holy Diver, I'm not sure I really can name a lot of Ronnie James. Yeah, Ronnie James Dio.
Yeah.
I mean,
There.
I'm more thinking of that one Tenacious D song.
Oh, yeah. But Meatloaf's his dad.
Yeah.
Plus the artwork on the Dio albums is so cool.
Yeah, I mean that 70s heavy metal, 80 early 80s heavy metal definitely had a an aesthetic to it. Um then there's a couple band like some bands I'm not sure like Bad Company, I don't know.
I know of them. I don't know
Yeah,
enough of them.
they started with Paul Rogers, went to Brian Howe, went to Robert Hart, and then went back to Paul Rogers. 3 Days Grace started with Adam Gentier, then went to Matt Walst, and now they have both of them. They were just like Adam came back and they're like, no, we just have two lead singers.
Oh, I like their older stuff more than the new. But okay, I can't say newest because
I
they have
didn't
both. But I like the original albums
yes, I didn't
better
know
than the later ones.
I can't and I'm wondering if they weren't as popular. Now, and this is where, we're gonna have some debate as we go along. Um does like so like Ozzy like Black Sabbath's popularity never really waned. Like when they went from Ozzy to Ronnie to whoever else back to Ozzy, like I mean they went up and down, but they've pretty much always been Black Sabbath. Van Halen, pretty much was always super popular. So sometimes changing your lead singer doesn't hurt your career. Sometimes it
It
will get
might have for 3 Days Grace.
right. It sounds like with because I remember early 3 Days Grace, and then I haven't really heard much of them. And I guess I didn't even know until I was doing this that the original lead singer had left. And then Kill Switch Engage started with Jesse Leach, went to Howard Jones, and then went back to Jesse Leach.
The
Um,
earlier stuff is definitely better for them too.
so that's the oops, I did it again section. We went back to the first guy.
Kind of
All right.
interesting how many groups did that. They're like,
Right.
and it was like, did they leave because they were kicked out because
Is about
they
half
needed
and
to get
half.
help for some kind of like a treatment, or was it like they left to do their solo thing and went, oh, I'm not doing this very well.
Well, like the Van Halen stuff was like the Van Halen brothers were very, or I guess sometimes can be difficult to deal with, but like David Lee Roth is a crazy person.
Yeah.
And so like he can be really hard to deal with. So when you have two immovable objects of hard to deal with, they went off in their separate ways. And then Sammy Hagar would just kind of show up and do his thing, and then he wanted to do his own stuff, and then his attitude,
Where
like,
where like Ozzy, it's like, dude, you need to go get help.
right, yeah, where Ozzy was like, you're going to die, and
Yeah.
you need to go get sober. Which brings us to the next section. Don't fear the Reaper. Changed the lead singer due to death.
Oh,
Um,
this one will be sad.
yeah. So AC/DC started with Bon Scott. He died, so they went to Brian Johnson. He had some. So this one could have been on both sections of the ones we covered. Brian Johnson had to retire due to some medical issues, so they picked up Axl Rose for a little while. And then Brian Johnson's medical issues cleared up enough, or they were able to get enough that he's now back in AC/DC.
Yeah, you can probably do a whole list of just random things Axl Rose has showed up in.
Yeah. Then you've got Leonard Skinner, where Ronnie Van Zant died in a plane crash, and he was replaced by his brother Johnny Van Zant.
Yeah.
Sublime Bradley Noel died, and they replaced him with Rome Ramirez. But Noel's family sued, so now it's actually Sublime with Rome.
Oh, just change the name a little.
Yeah, just enough. Um, Stone Temple Pilots. This one was weird because Scott Weiland did die, but they fired him. But like they fired him a couple of times and always brought him back before like the next album. They brought in Chester Bennington for a little bit, and then both Chester Bennington and Scott Weiland died before they could really do anything. And now they have a guy named Jeff Gunn. Um,
All right.
and I don't know if you remember when I told you I went and saw Stone Temple Pilots last year at the Summerfest, whatever they call
Yeah.
that pavilion. Man, he's actually pretty good. I mean, now I will say I I don't know if it's a function of the fact that they're a 90s band, so that their popularity maybe isn't where it was, or if people just aren't as into them because Scott Weiland has passed. I mean, they sound great, but they have not had the radio career, obviously, that they had when they were with Scott.
It's, I think some of it is how much music has changed since then. So
Right.
there's people our ages that are still like, man, I still like this band, even though they haven't adapted to where
Yes.
music is now. So the newer people are like, I don't like that. I like this auto tune mumble
Yeah. Uh,
garbage.
yeah, because when I went and saw him, it was who was it? It was Soul Asylum Live and Stone Temple Pilots. There were a lot of guys who looked like me.
Yeah, I'd say that's gonna be
It had
your
it had the general color of the beard that I currently have. Yeah.
that you currently have.
That you've got a little bit too. So yeah.
We're both rocking the
Then
salt and pepper.
we've got Alice in Chains. Lane Staley passed away, and they went to William Duvall. Which honestly, I saw. I'm blanking on his name now. The lead guitarist of Alice in Chains.
Oh, I couldn't tell you his name.
Uh, I saw him when he was doing his solo tour, open up for Metallica, and I was like, man, he doesn't need Lane Staley. He could just do it on his own. So it's kind of weird that he hired a. Do you remember NXS at all?
Yes, I remember
Okay,
them.
Michael Hutchins died, and they replaced him with JD Fortune, which I could say Michael Hutchins dying pretty much ended NXS's career. They never recovered from that.
Yeah, they were never the same.
And then Queen, when obviously Freddie Mercury, he passed away. And then like 20 years later, they're like, let's try to make a comeback with actually, it was probably like 30 years later, with Adam Lambert.
Yeah,
And then this is the one that started the whole list in my head to begin with. Linkin Park.
right.
So we already talked about Chester Bennington passed away. They replaced him with Emily Armstrong, which is kind of a weird choice. Um,
It is. I don't hate it.
when I first heard it, like before I heard the music, I heard the news, and I was like, "That's a terrible idea. This is gonna suck." And then I heard the first song, and I'm like, "Okay, that's not bad."
Have you listened to that album?
Not the whole album, but I've listened to, I've heard 4 or 5 songs off of it. It's really good.
It is good.
It's really good. Like I like it way more than I thought, and I don't know if my obviously my initial like I didn't want to see anybody try to replace Chester. It'd be like Soundgarden trying to replace Chris Cornell. Like my initial thought was, if you want to keep doing music, like change the name, become something else, do what Audioslave did. I kept seeing Rage Against the Machine on this list, and I did not include them because the 3 guys from Rage Against the Machine fired, or Zach De La Rocha quit and went off and did anything, and they hired Chris Cornell. But to me, they didn't. It wasn't Rage Against the Machine. Audioslave was an entirely different thing of an itself. Like
Right.
Rage doesn't sound like Audioslave. Soundgarden doesn't sound like Audioslave. Audioslave sounds like something else altogether.
That Linkin Park switched out a couple members.
Yeah, but I mean, we're not talking about drummers or guitarists or
Right. Oh well, when Emily took over, a couple of them were just kind of like, no, we can't. We're not
yeah.
going to continue.
Yeah, and I mean, I get it because like you've got a fan base, you've built a brand, you have, a catalog. So like you don't want to give that up and like you don't want to try to start over from the bottom. Now, granted, if you're the members of Link,
From zero.
yeah, if you're the members of Lincoln Park, you're not necessarily starting on the ground floor when you start over because people are going to be like, "Oh, that's Mike Shinoda," or "That's those are the couple like Audio Slave wasn't starting from the ground up and having to hit the back rooms and playing, the dive bars because they
Right.
were like, "Hey, we're so and so," and they're like, "Oh, well, yeah, all right, come on over. We'll, you know, they probably weren't selling out the Pfizer, the big, but I was about to say Bradley, but that doesn't work,
I don't even know if they would have been selling out the Bradley.
but they wouldn't have been selling that out like first out of the gate. But it's kind of like the Foo Fighters. The Foo Fighters, granted, it was only like two of the guys from Nirvana, but still, like they weren't. Dave Grohl wasn't starting on, you
Yeah, he wasn't
know,
starting from scratch.
right? He wasn't starting
I
from scratch.
gotcha.
He had a fan base to start with. Um, so
One
yeah.
you didn't mention on that list. I don't know who the lead singer is now, but Static X too.
Oh, right. I forgot about them.
Because
Yeah,
when Wayne
wait.
Static passed, I don't know
Yeah.
who took over, but I know they still tour.
Yes, I saw that. And I'm like, why? Because like, is it, I mean, now did Wayne Static change his name to Wayne? It's like Rob Zombie. Rob Zombie's real name isn't Rob Zombie, it's Rob something. I don't know. Did Wayne Static change his name to Static because he named his name Static, his band Static X, or did they name it Static X because he was already calling himself Wayne Static? But
I have no idea. He's a Wisconsin product though.
is he?
I think so. I think the first album is Wisconsin Death Trip. I think because they
Yes.
were formed somewhere in Wisconsin.
Oh, I thought it was because he read that book.
I thought he was from here. I thought he
Oh.
was from Madison. Can I do two things on once on this thing? I'm gonna sure try.
Um, but yeah. Oh, and that. Oh, wait.
But I still hear you if you lost
Oh,
me.
okay. Oh, yeah. I can't see you, but all right. And that reminds me, Drowning Pool would be another one that I didn't put on my list. Their lead singer died, and I I still can't find the tickets available, but they keep saying they're supposed to be at 1175, that little dive bar that's over by my house.
Oh yeah,
But yeah, they're so yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of bands that just didn't make the list because they weren't very big. Or there's a couple that I left off because I had never even heard of them. And I was like, if I've never heard of them, what are the chances that either of them had heard of them?
it's Wayne Wells
Okay.
From Muskegon, Michigan.
Oh, so close.
Oh, so not a Wisconsin product, but Michigan.
But his first album was Wisconsin Death Trip, so
Right.
that is a really good album.
Yeah, it is. I was listening to it the other day.
Um, but yeah, so there we go. There's Don't Fear the Reaper. Bands that have changed their leaders because of and that's the thing. Like generally speaking, the lead singer is considered to be the leader of the band. Most of the time, the lead singer is who founded the band, who started it. It's not always the case.
Yeah.
Um, but in this case, and that's what a lot of people because he's the front man. Well, that they call the lead singer the front man. Like he's the guy that everybody sees or
Yeah,
she,
he is like they are the band.
right. And so most of the time when the lead singer, something happens to the lead singer, it's just like, oh well, time to move on to another band.
Right.
Then there are other times where you get, um, this was more of a joke for Jeremy because Soul Sucking Jerk is a Beck song about being fired. So that's what we're at now. Fired. Like we said, get the fuck out.
Adios, bye.
Um, Pink Floyd.
Soul sucking jerk.
Well, they suck. But oops, did I say that? Uh, Sid Barrett was their initial lead singer. He was doing so many drugs and so much alcohol and so many other things that they fired him. and Roger Waters and David Gilmour took over as co-lead singers. I would say that Pink Floyd probably went on to a much bigger, more successful career after they fired Sid Barrett, but they were pretty popular when they fired him. Fleetwood Mac. I did not write down everything with Fleetwood Mac because that, if you want to read a soap opera of like insane levels of things that happened, go read the Wikipedia page for Fleetwood Mac's band history. It is they fired their original guy and brought in Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. I think Christine McVie was already there, but Lindsey Buckingham was married to Stevie Nicks. He was so, and then those two, like after like 2 years of being in the band together, got divorced, but then they stayed in the band together, but they hated each other, so they kept fighting, and it was just it was, and then one person would get fired, so they'd bring the other person back, and oh, it was just
It needs
I
to be a Netflix docuseries.
it probably could be just off of Fleetwood Mac. In the same vein, you have Journey, who went from Greg Rolla to Robert Fleischman to Steve Perry to Steve Aguirre to Jeff Scott Solo to Arnel Pineda, who they hired off of YouTube.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
remember that story.
yeah. Foreigner, who could have been in a couple of these categories, fired Lou Gramm, hired Johnny Edwards, went back to Lou Gramm, only to have him quit. Went to Chaz Weston and then Kelly Hansen. And then the Doobie Brothers in Boston are also kind of in the same boat as Fleetwood Mac. Like the level of like trying to figure out who was the lead singer when and how many lead singers they've been through was insane. Like honestly, like with Foreigner and or Journey, like trying to figure out if there's even an original member of those bands was hard.
That's yeah. Bands who have no original members left.
Yeah, that could be it's like would you go see like Foreigner or whatever? I mean, they're generic rock. Like they're not bad. They're not like but like would you go see Foreigner? Like if they're like, yeah, no, is it even the original band? Like it's same thing with like Leonard Skinner, who we just talked about. Like so many of those guys have passed on or have retired because they're old. They're like, I mean, would if you go see Leonard Skinner or Foreigner in concert, are you seeing them in concert anymore, or are you just seeing a
It's like
trip?
almost like a yeah, like a cover tribute band.
Like a tribute band who just happened to have the title because the real band was like, yeah, we're too old. We hired these guys.
Yeah, we're passing the torch.
Speaking of which, on a completely different note, and we'll get back to this list in a little bit. I was listening to this podcast called The Omnibus with Ken Jennings, the Jeopardy guy,
All right.
and John Roderick, the lead singer of The Long Winters. They do this podcast where they talk about just random subjects. Like every episode is dedicated to a different subject. And one of them was back in the early days of rock and roll, so the 50s, 60s, before music was really where it was. And like it was just like the recording industry was a lot more wild, wild west. There were record companies that would hire bands. So there was in particular, this one was about a band called the Zombies that were in England. Put out an album and then broke up. The album started getting kind of popular, but there was nobody to tour. So there were record labels here in America who were like, well, nobody knows who the Zombies look like, or they only seen some pictures. So if we put some guys in a fairly similar costume, and they trained a bunch of bands on how to play the album and just toured them as the Zombies.
Oh,
And then they started doing it with other bands because they started getting away with it. And then eventually the bands found out that, hey, you're but one of the groups that they hired to be the Zombies was a group of guys who went on to become very famous. Maybe you've heard of them. One guy's name is, I think, Frank Beard.
okay. I've heard of Frank Beard.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a beard though, does he?
No, no, he doesn't. But the rest of the guys in his band does. Yeah. ZZ Top was originally hired to be a fake cover band. They got so good and they were one of the better ones. They got so good and so popular at doing that, they became their own band and called themselves ZZ Top. That was kind of anyway. Neither here nor
I
there. I
mean, I
just
mean,
heard.
two-thirds of us look like ZZ Top in this podcast.
I mean, if we had Jeremy here, it would basically be ZZ Top with no musical abilities.
I mean, hey, we can play Rock Band with the best of them.
That is true. We did do that the one time. All right, back to the you're fired category.
Back to your
Uh,
regular scheduled program.
Iron Maiden. First couple albums were done with a guy named Paul Di'Anno. They decided they didn't like him or they just weren't getting anywhere, so they fired him and went with Bruce Dickinson, and then became one of the biggest heavy metal bands of all time. So in this case,
I was trying to think of early Iron Maiden stuff, which one I kind of like better. Probably the
I
newer stuff.
yeah, and by newer you mean still stuff from the 80s,
Still,
but
yeah, still old, but newer for the band.
um, then there was Queensryche, who
Okay.
had a guy named Jeff Tate, who they fired in a meeting where he wasn't at. Hired a guy named Todd LaTorre. Jeff Tate was so angry about being fired, he started another Queensryche. So for a while, there were two Queensryche bands touring, and then they started suing each other, and there was a whole legal battle. And unfortunately for Jeff Tate, or fortunately for Todd LaTorre and his group won because I guess they had more members of Queensryche than Jeff Tate did. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that. Oh,
Don't know what the hell happened there.
okay. All right. Well, Faith No
Yeah,
More.
I was gonna say that's weird when bands switch out like a singer and then they sue, kind of going back and forth. Because who'd that happen with? CCR?
Yeah, they sue each other all the time. And now, like,
Because John Fogerty sounds too much like them because that's just how he sounds.
right. Yeah. The Eagles, I think, sue each other. That's why I think why Journey has so many different lead singers because they keep suing each other. I think Foreigner sues themselves all the time. Faith No More did an album or two with a guy named Chuck Mosley and then went to Mike Patton. I didn't know that Faith No More had a lead singer that wasn't Mike Patton.
Yeah, I don't.
So,
That's the only one I know of.
so I would say they made the right choice there. I mean, Blood, Sweat, and Tears was founded and started by a guy named Al Cosper. Be helpful if I could read my own writing. I want to say Al Cosper. So he started the band. They decided to fire him and hire a guy named Paul Clayton Thomas and became much more famous. So the band made the right choice, but pretty sure Al was like, but this was my band.
Yeah, I started this.
And I didn't know how to include these guys on the list, but Bare Naked Ladies.
Okay.
So when they first started, were co-lead singers of Stephen Page and Ed Robertson. Um, and then at some point, Stephen Page got arrested for some drugs and cocaine and various things, so they fired him. But Ed Robertson was so he just took over as like the permanent like lead singer on
That's
everything.
the lead singer.
Yeah. So I didn't know where like because I was like, but Ed Robertson was already the lead singer.
Yeah, he was already there. He just stepped
He
into the role.
Right. So instead of just like every other song or like, going back chorus, like if you listen to 1 week, you can definitely hear when Ed sings and when Steven sings. But now it's just Ed. Like he just does it all. So I didn't know where to put them on the list. And then for the last category, we have We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together. This is the I quit. Fuck you guys. I'm out of here.
Uh, you're cool. You're cool. Fuck
Um,
you. How about?
So we have Genesis, where Peter Gabriel was like, I want to be my own guy. Fuck you guys. And rather than hire somebody, they just went, Hey Phil, you're the drummer. We're just gonna move the microphone a couple feet back on the stage, or move the drums up a couple feet on stage. You're the lead singer and the drummer.
You do both now, buddy.
So Phil Collins took over there. Um then here's another band that could have been just in about any other category, but Black Flag, well, maybe not the death category. Black Flag, which I think I knew there was lead singers other than Henry Rollins, but like they started with Keith Morris, he quit, went to Ron Reyes, they fired him. D Des Cadena took over. And then he was like, I don't want to be the lead singer. I just want to be the guitarist. So he moved over to the other side of the stage. Henry Rollins took over for a while until he got too famous, where he was like, I want to do my own shit. And then Mike Valley took over. And then just recently, a woman named Max Zeleny or Max Zelensky, I don't know how to pronounce the last name. She has taken over.
I like Henry Rollins.
Yes.
Just in general. He's a he's an interesting guy.
Yeah, yeah, he is a very interesting guy. And I think he, because he's more, do you consider what he does now stand up or spoken word? Like, what is,
Well, it's more of a spoken word thing.
eh,
He's a storyteller.
right? Because he's not really, I mean, sometimes he's funny, but like, I don't think he's like trying to be funny. Like, I
No,
mean, he might,
he's just telling stories of his life
right. So,
at 1,000 miles an hour, going in 40 different directions.
and he's friggin' huge. Like, I mean, I think he's short, but he's just stacked.
Yeah,
Um,
he's
but yeah,
built like tank.
he is entertaining. He is, and then a band that I think you are probably a fan of, Cannibal Corpse.
Haven't listened to him in a while. I am familiar with them.
They originally were fronted by Chris Barnes, and he was like, "I'm out. I'm done. I hate you guys." And this was the only bigger rock and roll name that I could come up with than Ripper, George Corpse Grinder Fisher.
Ah, I think that might be a nickname.
But yeah, he took over. Then there's Dropkick Murphys,
All right.
Mike McGlone or McLaughlin. I don't know. He did their first album and then was like, I don't really want to be with these guys anymore. So he quit. And Al Barr took over, and then they've gone on to become really famous. And then this is where we get into a little bit more murky categories. Deep Purple. Started with Rod Evans. He quit. They went to Ian Gillan. Now, I don't know why they switched from Ian Gillan to David Coverdale or why they went back to Ian Gillan, but they could have been in it. There's some, it was kind of hard sometimes to figure out where to put certain bands, but
Yeah, it sounds like a bunch of them are in like a couple of different
yeah.
categories.
And then Moody Blues started with Denny Lane. He did an album or two before he was like, yeah, I want to go do my own thing. He quit and was taken over by Justin Hayward.
Hmm.
So So yeah, so it's a mixed bag. Like, you have a band like Genesis who was pretty famous with Peter Gabriel, but became, I think, probably more famous under Phil Collins.
Yeah, would agree.
But Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins have both had like probably bigger careers than Genesis itself.
I'll also agree. They're more well known than Genesis.
Certain, there's some of these bands that are on the list that, were really successful when they fired or had their band somebody. I mean, I'm guessing the reason why a lot of the bands that aren't on the list aren't on the list was because they kind of floated off into the nothingness of having a career at all anyway.
Right.
The lead singer died, quit, fired, and then for whatever reason the new band never just took off far enough for them to even make it on a list where when I researched it they found it. But
One that just popped into my head for I don't remember the names of the category. Don't Fear the Reaper. Uh, Guar as well when
oh
Dave
yeah.
Brockie passed. I don't know who took over the lead singer duties. I don't know if they got a new lead singer or just someone else from the band.
Yeah, I don't know. And Guar, I did briefly think about Guar, but then I forgot to go back and research it. Um, Guar makes it so hard to figure out who is who, and like, I mean, I know like what was his name?
Dave
You,
Brockie, the lead singer.
yeah, well, I
It's
don't
like
like,
Odious Maximus or
yeah,
something
Odious
like that.
Maximus, yeah, like,
Uh,
yeah, I don't know, like because well, go back to our mashed band episode. Um, Guar makes it hard to know who's in the band to begin with. So, I
Beefcake.
mean,
Who's under Beefcake the Mighty? I don't know.
nobody knows. So yeah, I mean,
Slipknot replaced their lead singer with Corey Taylor very early on. I don't even know if that was. before they did studio albums,
Right,
but
yeah.
they had a different lead singer before Corey Taylor took over.
Right. There were a couple bands that were like on the list of like that, and I was like, well, I'm not including them because like they never recorded anything or hadn't really toured, or it was like this
Yeah,
was the
that might be one of them. Anthrax might be another one.
and then there was a lot of, like I said, there was a lot of the list I kept coming across wanted to put Audio Slave on there, and I'm like, that's two different bands.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, just because every member of Audio Slave was in Rage Against the Machine except the lead singer, like they changed their name. And now that's where that's was my argument with Linkin Park originally and still kind of is. I don't know if now that they're putting out music and people are hearing it, if people are like, okay, maybe we were wrong at first and maybe this actually is really good, or if people are still fighting it. Um,
I think
I
it's very 50-50.
Yeah. But I mean, I think had Mike Shinoda been like, all right, you're right. Like we're gonna, Chester died, he passed away, and we still want to do stuff. I'm still creative. Like I've got an outlet. I want to do something. So I'm gonna change the name of the band to, Plinkin Lark or something.
It probably would have been Zero because the original band was called Zero before
Uh,
they settled on Linkin Park.
Okay, yeah, go call him Zero, do something. I wonder if people would have just been like, all right, cool. You guys are, you're trying something new. You're going in a different direction. You're still making the same style of music, but if people would have been more accepting of it had they not tried to continue the name. But like I said,
Yeah,
I get it from a branding perspective. Like, why start over? Like you already have it.
right. I don't know how many albums they put out too before that even happened. Like seven, eight?
Linkin Park
There,
albums?
yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I had three or four for sure. But I mean,
You
Minutes to
know,
Midnight, Meteora,
Hybrid Theory,
Hybrid Theory.
Wasting Light. There's got to be some more in there. I can't think off the top of my head.
I mean, there's
Four,
there's that
five,
one,
six of them.
there's that remix album, but I don't know if you consider that to be a whole album or
Oh,
just
The one with Jay-Z.
well, and they did that one, and then they did like where they took their songs and just like I think they took Hybrid Theory and just completely remixed it. But
Yeah, there's got to be five of them.
yeah,
Six? I don't know.
so I mean
I should know this.
it does put you in a weird situation where if something happens, like you have to sit back and genuinely think, like in the situation where like, and I'm sure it's situationally dependent. Like if Chester had died doing something terrible, like maybe they're just like, oh, we got to retire the name. But because he passed away at his own hands, and because of the mental illness, I don't like. It's not like he had become a domestic terrorist or something. You
Yeah.
know, So it's not like you had to be like, well, we have to get away from this name altogether. Um,
Yeah, you don't have to de-associate or whatever
yeah.
with them.
So that you're in a situation where like, do you give up name recognition and brand recognition and possible loyalty to start over again at zero, knowing that like you're gonna have a certain inborn fan base to begin with, and hope that radio picks you up, or do you go, well, we're Linkin Park, we can just stay Linkin Park? I don't know, but
I think because of how far in they were and how loyal the fans are, that
yeah,
it's easier just to keep it.
right. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, and now that I've gone through here and I did spend some time researching it, like I'd say it's a mixed bag across the board, but overall, like if you have a fan base to begin with, sometimes changing the lead singer isn't bad. Like I didn't find any case where like changing the lead singer just like ended the band altogether. Like
Right.
Stone Temple Pilots have not hit the level of success that they were at back in the 90s. But you got to wonder if like Scott Weiland hadn't had all the drug problems, if they wouldn't still be in the same exact boat they're in right now with Jeff Gunn.
Yeah. And they have I think they were what established enough where they have their
Right. They've got
They
a pretty
they they
loyal
have their fan base.
right. They've got a pretty loyal fan base that they could, they didn't sell out the the Summerfest stadium, but it was full. I mean, it was definitely three-quarters full.
Yeah,
It was, now granted they were also there with live, but it wasn't like when Stone Temple Pilots got off the stage, like half the stadium showed up or half the stadium left because they were like, fuck live. But
right.
I mean, it was you had two pretty big 90s bands there, and that's why I was there because they're two bands that I absolutely love from the 90s. But no, so I don't know. I mean, I think it's situationally dependent. I think like every other band, like if the drummer dies or quits or something happens, it's much easier to replace him without anybody noticing. Like Pearl Jam's gone through
I'm gonna
like,
say not Pantera's drummer,
well, no, but I mean, you know, well, we talked about Genesis. I mean, Genesis, Phil Collins is the lead, the leader of that band, and he's the drummer. The Eagles, Don Henley, is the
which one did Kiss replace somebody too?
Kiss.
Yeah, did they replace somebody?
Oh, they've replaced everybody
What, Gene Simmons?
but Gene Simmons at some point.
That's fair.
I think even Gene Simmons maybe got replaced once, but
Put Dio in there in the makeup.
yeah, probably. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, it's easier to replace not the lead singer and move on. I mean, Metallica has done really well after, Cliff Burton died. And then, not Jason Newsted. Yeah, was it? No. No, Jason, I can't remember. It's hard for me to keep up. He quit and the other guy showed up. Or he quit.
Yeah,
Um, but it's easier to do that. But at the same time, like if you have a fan base, or in the case of say um Dropkick Murphys, like they got more popular after
they
their
got bigger.
they got bigger, you know. Or Faith No More after that guy got fired, I don't even remember what it was. I'm looking at the quit list, so he was after he got fired, Faith No More became a much bigger band.
Yeah.
So was the right choice to fire the guy and move on. So and can you think of anybody else or
No, I was kind of just naming them as I was thinking of them.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you watch anything over the last week or the last 2 weeks? I guess we didn't
Uh,
record.
yeah. I watched more Arrowverse. Couldn't tell you
Okay.
what how far I am, but I've been watching that. I watched a documentary on the Tylenol killer
Well,
from
I do want to watch that
the
one.
80s, late
Yes.
80s,
Yeah,
early 80s.
I do want to watch that one.
And then I watched the Pee Wee Herman documentary as well.
I did as well. That's on my list. Let's talk about that one then since we both
Uh,
watched it.
I got about 8% till I die here.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we
It's fun.
will. Okay.
So if I disappear, you're on your own.
Okay. Um, what do you think of it?
It was interesting. Like some of it I knew. I was I don't want to say I was very surprised, but I was surprised by some of it too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I knew he was gay, but
See that one I knew. That didn't surprise me.
it didn't surprise me. Like I wasn't like, oh, I was like, oh,
Yeah. Like,
okay.
all right. The
Yeah,
fact that like the thing I didn't realize was he was so open about it at first,
right.
and then he just decided he had to be something else in order to get approval from Hollywood to be Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah, which is sad,
Yeah,
Hollywood was like that back then. You know, but he was probably right. Like I don't know if they would have let him be like a host of a very popular children's TV show if he was open, you know.
it made me kind of want to go back and watch some of Pee Wee's Playhouse.
It did. I didn't realize that Natasha Lyonne had gotten her start on that.
Yeah, or Samuel L. Jackson. Kind of forgot about not him. Lawrence
Oh,
Fishburne.
Lawrence Fishburne, yeah.
I kind of forgot about him.
Oh,
Cowboy Curtis.
yeah. it was interesting to see how connected Paul Rubens was in like the Saturday Night Live world, like with Phil Hartman and a lot of other guys that came out of the Groundlings.
Yeah,
Like I knew that, I at some point not at the time, obviously, later on in life, I became aware that, Pee Wee Herman had started as like a late night like adult show, like for live audiences
right before becoming the kids show.
before becoming a kid show. But like watching when they showed clips from the kid show, it was just like memory like overload of like I didn't necessarily recognize any of the clips away, but just like, oh my God, that's where that came from, or oh, that's what, just I was like, I did watch so much of that show and I
You
forgot.
you're like, I remember this.
I remember that I don't
I saw a lot of reruns because what was that, late 80s was Pee Wee's Playhouse?
I think it was like 83. It was yeah, I think it was the mid 80s, like
Oh yeah,
the
because
5 years in the mid 80s.
I would have only caught the later stuff when they were kind of reshowing it
I looked it up. They are running or they are airing all of the stuff on Max right now.
on Max. Yeah, I looked that up too because I was like, I kind of want to rewatch some of this
Yeah.
stuff.
But it was sad at the same time, like just and it's weird watching it knowing like he knew how sick he was, and he was just
Yeah,
intentionally hiding it from them,
from everybody.
from everybody. It's
Yeah, the other part I found really sad was with the guy from Beetlejuice, how they like accused Peter Herman of that. So they like confiscated all the stuff and
yes.
they were just trying to, I don't know, make an example out of him
Well,
as well.
because he was famous.
Yeah,
They had a chance to make a name for themselves and crucify a celebrity, and I guess they were hoping he would just roll over and play dead, and he didn't, which in that case, like I wouldn't either. Like, if I was that innocent, like I wouldn't have rolled over and been like, all right, let me take it just to get over and done with. But
yeah. Well, I'll just accept what you call me just so I don't have to deal with this. Like, no, this isn't true at all.
right. So it was a little long, but at the same time, like I could have watched another, like, I probably could have watched a part three.
Yeah, I could watch another episode if they had one.
Yeah. What else did I watch? I watched a show on Netflix called Man on the Inside. Ted Danson. It's a like a 6 or 8 episode like sitcom from the guy who created The Good Place, Brooklyn Nine-Nine,
All right,
Parks and Rec. And
those are some pretty
so
good shows.
Ted Danson plays a retired guy who is just looking to do something with his life because he's just sitting around the house doing nothing. So become like takes so a private investigator takes out an ad for a retired guy because like they're trying to investigate some crime that happened in a retirement community. And it's funny, it's touching. It James Gunn broke me, man. I'm telling you, because it happened again.
Oh, wow.
I
What? You broke the seal. You can't close that back
I
up.
apparently James Gunn broke me, and I just can't go. I can't close that box now. Fuck you, James Gunn.
Yeah.
And
Giving
then
me
I
feelings.
and then I watched a movie on Apple TV called Fountain of Youth with John Krasinski and Natalie Portman.
I've seen clips of it, but I've not watched it.
It wants to be Indiana Jones, it wants to be the librarians, it wants to be a bunch of things, and it just kind of instead of trying to
Sounds,
find,
sounds like it just isn't.
yeah, it wasn't bad, but it just wasn't like it wasn't good. Like it was mid, you know,
All right.
because it was trying too hard to be everything rather than find its own, like try to like you can take elements and be like, I want to be Indiana Jones like, but let me find my own way in rather than just be like, I want to be Indiana Jones. Like,
All right. I want to pay like homage to this and do something in the same boat. And sounds like they just didn't.
yeah. Because have you ever read any of the Clive Cussler stuff like Raise the Titanic or
Let,
Sahara?
let, let's stop right there with the first part of that sentence. Did you ever read?
No, that's true.
Let's
That's true.
stop there. I
That's true. You went to school in East Troy. I forget. I'm sorry.
have a learning disability.
Um, did you ever see the movie Sahara or Raise the Titanic or
I saw the movie Sahara.
the Matthew McConaughey movie?
Yeah, Steve Zahn.
Yeah. So
Yep.
Matthew McConaughey plays a character named Dirk Pitt, and there's a whole series of books that are like kind of like not swashbuckling, but basically like in the vein of like every book is connected in so much as that it's the same kind of characters, but none of the stories are connected. Kind of like Indiana Jones, or like
Oh,
every movie is connected, but not really.
right. Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of like Indiana Jones meets James Bond meets, whatever, whoever else falls in that category. That's what the Dirk Pitt stuff is. And I could see like them trying to do Dirk Pitt, them trying to do Indiana Jones, them trying to do, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And it was rather than try to do their own thing, they just kind of were like paint by numbers.
Yeah, picking and choosing things they like from each one and hoping it'll make a good movie.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't, like I said, wasn't bad, wasn't good. I don't not recommend it, but I don't recommend it. So
Like a good background thing.
yeah,
Or is it something I'd have, like if I have the dishes or doing dishes or something, I have it on in the
right.
background.
Like if you got
All
nothing
right.
else, if you got nothing else to watch, it's not a bad watch, but like, if you got, if you haven't caught up on the Pee Wee Herman documentary you know,
I'm not, or like working my way through the Arrowverse.
or you're not working your way through the Arrowverse, maybe you
I saw King
watch.
of the Hill's coming back.
I did see that.
I thought about trying to watch King of the Hill, but I was like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, yeah, I'm so far behind on King of the Hill. I think if I start the new one, I'll just be like, hopefully they'll recap what I need to know.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I watched the last couple seasons.
Yeah, I'm pretty far behind as
So,
well.
all right. Well, you got anything else or?
I don't think so. I don't think anything's coming out that I really am excited about seeing. The John Wick one comes out, I think, this Friday. I want to see that one, Ballerina.
Oh yeah, I finally saw John Wick 4.
What'd you think?
It was okay.
I know some people who didn't like it, but
I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it as much as I liked the first couple.
that's fair.
I think I think it was maybe just a titch too long. Like I'm not one of these 90-minute people who are like every movie should be 90 minutes. A movie should take however long a movie should take.
Right. There's some parts where it's like you could probably shave that movie down 20 minutes. It'd
Yeah,
still be good.
yeah. And,
But
the ending, while ambiguous, clearly wasn't the what actually happened because, you know, they're clearly doing a John Wick 5 at some point.
oh yeah, they'll have to.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess if you are Artie Moreno and you own the Angels, just remember, stupid never walks alone, you dumb motherfucker.
All right.
Comic books have been around for almost a century, and in the last 2 decades, we've finally gotten to see many of these characters brought to life in movies and on TV. On the Moving Panels podcast, we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. Join me and my guests as we discuss both the good and the bad from Marvel, DC, and even some of the lesser-known comic book companies. Learn what is and isn't from the comics, as well as our nerdy review of the movie or show. New episodes drop every Monday, and you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. So join us for Moving Panels, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and listen to an 80s Flick Flashback podcast once in a while, you could miss it. Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes, VCRs, and the video rental stores? Does the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? My name is Tim Williams. I'm the creator and host of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast. On each episode, I'm joined by guest co-hosts to discuss one of the many movies released in the 1980s. We share our first-time watch memories, our favorite scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories about the cast and crew along the way. New episodes are released every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an excellent episode of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast. The ad is over. Go home. Go.